So welcome to our self-healing class. This class, I could say originally started with Ernest Holmes because he was the teacher of Louise Hay in the science of mind. And Ernest Holmes talked about learning to live the affirmative life. And I'm going to break that down a little bit so you can understand it. A person who is living the affirmative life is committed to seeing the good, the unfolding good. That's really the commitment. To be out of the story where we're not good enough, and what some people used to call race consciousness. And what they meant by race consciousness really has nothing to do with racial issues as people think about, but the human race in the 2020s is at a point of evolution. And some of my friends will say it's going to hell in a handbasket, and other people think it's the most exciting time in the world to be alive. And depending upon your own personal experiences, you're going to have a worldview. You're going to have a worldview where things are great or good or they're getting better. You're going to have a worldview where things are terrible. And so what we teach in our teaching is always about consciousness. And self-healing, at least in this class, the Louise Hay class, has to do with the mind and the body connection. In other words, your thoughts, your mind, deeply imprint your body functioning. And your thoughts, furthermore, are creative. So if I have a consciousness of prosperity, or I have a consciousness of love, and that's, for the most part, being extended in my day-to-day living, that will eventually start to come back to me. So Louise Hay would say we're each 100% responsible for our experiences. She never was saying that anyone's, when she said responsible for all of her experiences, she wasn't suggesting that we were to blame for anything. It's just, for example, if I were in a bad series of relationships, the easy way out is to blame all the partners you've had. Like every last one of them been rotten to the core or something like that. The more enlightened thing to do would be to take a look at how you were yourself in those relationships, because it's one thing if we were in one that wasn't working out well, but if you're a little bit down the road, you've been, say you're 50, 60 or something, and you scan back in your life and you think, oh my God, I'm not very good with relationships. You'll probably start to conclude, like most of us, that we always had a part in these situations. And the tendency in the world usually is to blame other people, but this teaching is a little bit different because we really talk about taking self-responsibility. And again, we're not talking about blaming ourselves. And Louise Hay would say, please don't use these classes or these exercises as a way to further criticize yourself or blame yourself, right? But understand that life works according to what she called laws, or what Ernest Holmes called laws, the law of mind. And what that simply means, if you're entertaining a whole body of thoughts in your day-to-day, hour-by-hour, day-to-day living, there's an expression, like produces like. And so what she's getting at here is, if your consciousness is overflowing with, say, negative expectations or a negative worldview, you unknowingly are using a law. It's a law of attraction, but you're not using it in a positive way. If your view tends to be on the downside about many things, if not most things, you're creating that reality first of all, in your consciousness. And after a while, that becomes, the tendency of that type of thinking becomes reflected in your world. So that's how I would interpret and further explain, what she says when she says each of us are responsible for all of our experiences. We're not to blame, but we could, if we really wanted to, we could start to change that internal dialogue around. And if we were really in earnest doing it, seriously doing it, then things would start to change. There's an expression from Stuart Wilde, which would be that there is a quickening that happens when we get on the beam and we just kind of like put our foot down and say, I'm equivalently mad as hell. I'm just not going to keep doing it this way. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to keep doing the same old thing, which we've talked about in different ways. In recovery circles, they talk about the man or woman who walked down the street around the corner and fell at the hole in the sidewalk. Well, he or she did that the next day, and they did it the next day, and then they thought, oh, maybe I should do something different, but they still went down around the corner and they fell on the sidewalk. And how many of us are like that? We have these resolutions, we're coming into New Year's, and some people don't like resolutions because they know they're going to break them. But resolutions can be a very good thing, because if you're doing a daily pause, you're doing some meditation, you're reflecting on your life and where you have missed the mark, and that's how New Thought will describe sin. A sin is where you have missed the mark. It's not that you're bad, it's just that, something you're doing or thinking is not producing for you the things that you want. So it's good for us to have affirmative prayer and or meditation. And those people that I know who are in 12-step programs have got what's called a 10th step, which is all that really is, but it's important, is to every evening, or you could do it any time of the day, but usually it's evening, you think through your day, your interactions, and where you've been a positive force, or maybe where you weren't so positive, maybe where you were petty, or you were jealous, or you reacted, or you lashed out, or stuff like that. Because once we get a handle on this type of thinking and or this kind of behavior, we have awareness around the things that you're doing, thinking, or doing, that's your first, awareness is the place where everything starts. Because if you're operating, or if I'm operating in ignorance and I'm keeping on doing the same stuff over and over and over again, then I'm destined to keep on going through hellish experiences on earth. And Louise Hay and Ernest Holmes and all the great people, right back to Emerson, would suggest that each and every one of you on the call here you're meant to thrive. You're here to thrive. And you will thrive. They say the healing is done already in the mind of God. Well, what that means is, as you make these adjustments, they might seem small to you. As you learn to be a little bit more of a lifter, and as you learn to be a little bit more of an encouraging person, you're going to find that comes back to you. It will come back to you. If you are a constant complainer about the food or the service or the doctors or the weather or life, the economy, the political process, if most of your time is devoted to what's wrong and what's missing, well, that really speaks of another kind of consciousness. I've characterized it in these classes. I try to make fun out of it for you over the years. We used to talk about the person who's got the Chicken Little consciousness, and of course, that's the person who's always thinking the worst is going to happen. The sky is falling, And, and then basically my life is over, it's too late for me, and poor me, and ain't it awful. Well, that kind of consciousness we all understand, but it isn't the kind of consciousness that's going to draw to you the experiences that you want to have. So part of what we do here is we become mindful of what our inner dialogue is. You've heard me most every Thursday ask the question, what's it been like being you lately? And I only ask that question for one reason. For those people who want to either reflect on it, or some of you want to answer it, what's it been like being you lately? Because that's really the best predictor of what this weekend is going to be and next week is going to be. If you're carrying around a lot of negative thinking and beliefs, then that will have a tendency to become mirrored in your day-to-day experience. So where do you begin? How do you begin bringing about positive change, or having the positive outlook that Louise Hay talked about? She also had another conference that I was invited to, which was the I Can Do It tour. I mean, how do you get to be a person where you can actually turn your life around? Louise, in colorful ways in her different writings and books, she would always say you start where you are with the thought you're thinking. And any of us can look through today. I know today I've been through a lot of things, lots of conversations. Some of it's pleasant, some of it wasn't pleasant. And somehow you've got to get to a place where you shake it off and you have the willingness to begin again. I quote Raymond Charles Barker probably too often when he said, yesterday ended last night. And for me today, because today was full of a lot of activity and some of it wasn't particularly pleasant, I remember an old adage from a 12-step program, which is this: it's never too late to start your day over. Because we give our power away a lot. You can give it away in the bus, you can give it away in the train, you can give it away to your girlfriend, boyfriend, you can give it away to a bill collector, you can give it away in so many ways. And so when you're out of joint, you're lost your sense of being centered and supplied and supported, what can you do? My suggestion would be build into your day intentionally more pauses, more times for meditation, more quiet times. I remember 40 years ago, people were taking these little spiritual breaks about every 15 or 20 minutes. They might go to the ladies' room or someplace for a moment or two and just take a few breaths, give yourself a couple affirmations, and they would come out and they would proceed and move forward. You might find that to be silly now, but I remember at a time where a lot of people were doing that. People were they were praying and they were meditating. And they were praying for people that, had done them harm. And I always thought, well, why would you do that? It's the idea, if you have somebody in your life where there's been a lot of havoc, then you're most likely going to have a resentment. So the idea is pray for them that they receive everything good and everything they need. Because what you're going for there, of course, is for you to free yourself from the resentment. Louise Hay always said, because she had had cancer twice, I think 3 times, and at least 2 of them involved surgeries where parts of your body are removed and all of that. And the surgeries were successful, but she didn't think that the cancer was necessarily cured. And she wanted to do her prayer work to release the pattern within herself that was drawing dis-ease to her body. See, Louise was really trained well as a science of mind practitioner, and the science of mind, we deal with this in probably a little bit deeper way, because we teach you that there is a power, there is a presence, and you can learn how to use that presence. You can learn how to do powerful spiritual mind treatment. I've been in conferences and places throughout my life where I've seen people get on stages who they've shown and they've illustrated, they've demonstrated some amazing cures to things that, you just don't usually think that there's a cure to them. Before us, before religious science, we're all part of a branch of New Thought people, by the way, that came around about the same time in the United States. Many of them came from Europe. But before religious science, and I think even before unity, there was Christian science. And Christian science was very, very good because Mary Baker Eddy was talking about the power of prayer. She was talking about the fact that you can heal your life. The only thing about, and she had a lot of demonstrations. I mean, there were a lot of people who had a lot of healings. And so for many years, there were Christian Science reading rooms all over the country. The thing that differentiated her primarily from us is she was not a believer so much in doctors and procedures and science and all of the things that today many of us use. She rightfully thought that consciousness heals. And here's the thing, consciousness can heal. You can heal anything, If your consciousness is in such a place where you can neutralize, negative thought patterns, and where you can envision and visualize healthy, vibrant organs and operating activities in your system, the power to heal is in all of us. There is a book that came out some years later by a person who's, I don't know if he was a student of Deepak Chopra or vice versa. His name was Amit Goswami, and he wrote a book about quantum healing. So I read that book. I'd have to read it again. That's not like reading the Louise Hay book. That's a book you would study. But, he would say that there's bodies within bodies. I don't remember if there might be 7 within a human being or something. And he spoke of quantum healing, which reminded me of the healing that can take place in this teaching. Where you can have complete healings. You can have remissions. You can have healings of all kinds. So that reminded me a little bit about what Louise Hay talks about. Also it reminded me a little bit of what Mary Baker Eddy was doing with Christian Science. But the thing with the quantum doctor, when he was talking about quantum healing, and I read through all those chapters, and there's all kinds of modalities that are very, very interesting. So he made it clear that you have the ability to heal, just like we've been saying forever. But he also talked about consciousness. You have to have the consciousness of a person who's healing, right? And not everybody has that. So he was not advocating, not using medicine. Quite the contrary. This is Amit Goswami. He was saying the Western world in many ways is behind the Eastern world in medicine, except for 2 areas for sure. And he was speaking about, in the Western world, we have developed surgical procedures that are the envy of the world. And he said, so there's God in the doctors, there's God in the surgeons. And see, that wouldn't have been something that would have been acceptable to the Christian Scientists. And the other thing Amit Goswami said in that book, which is really good as an adjunct to self-healing, he said, you have the power to heal. This quantum healing, you have the power to heal. He said, but I also want to tell you the second great advance in modern healing from in terms of the West and its contribution, is antibiotics. So we're not purists here. You know, some people would say, well, you got to get back to the days where, like Christian Science, where it's just about faith. We're teaching you here that, you know, intelligence, God intelligence, spiritual intelligence is available in everything and through everything. And certainly we would recommend you see your doctors and you do your research and don't postpone getting, you know, your medical things done. So that was Mr. Goswami's contribution and his great work of the Quantum Doctor, which would be, and he'd had lots of other healing techniques too, but the two I remember off the top of my head, he says, the great things about Western medicine are surgery and antibiotics. And within that book, there was lots of other healing techniques, things that we would teach you in Science of Mind and through Louise Hay. So you have all kinds of resources at your disposal, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I just wanted to point you in a couple of directions tonight if you wanted to Google or look up any of that type of thing. Louise Hay knew for her to get rid of cancer, she had to get at the underlying issues that was causing cancer. It's just similarly, a little different idea, but let's say you've had a series of ill-fated relationships. It's one thing to kick the person to the door or kick them to the can and just, you know, say the next one will be better. But it's probably not going to be better unless you can get at the root of what it is in you that's really allowing that kind of person to come into your life. So it's in everything. If we want to have change, we really want to do a little bit of the inner work so that we can then release the need for it and then exclaim that I'm whole and I'm complete and I'm healthy and I'm attractive and I only attract loving people into my world. See, when you start doing some of that personal work, of course, you got to believe what you say. Then those people or those affirmations will eventually turn into demonstrations. One of my minister friends, you know, I used to say every thought you think is creating your future, which is correct, but I was corrected. She said it's really the tendency of your thinking. So in other words, if you think of it, you remember a teeter-totter when you were a kid? I don't know if they make them anymore. But, you know, it's like it's up or down. It's weighted. If one person weighs more than the other, they're going to down and the other person is going to go up. If your consciousness is balanced more towards what's wrong and what's missing, you know, the ain't it awful, and you're full of complaint about life, about people, and you're always involved in all this drama, you're most likely going to be attracting more of it, right? Conversely, if the tendency of your thinking tends to be positive, if you're the person who's really pretty much dedicated to say, good job, good job. There's a movie star, I won't mention her name, but she smiles at the homeless people. Whenever she gets off a plane, she always takes the time to acknowledge people. That's the equivalent of doing a namaste to everybody, taking that moment to seeing the good, the God in other people. Another friend of mine, Pat, she always smiles at people when she greets them, or she might shake their hand, I don't know, but she always smiles at them. She pauses. You know, these are people who've learned to take a pause from their busy lives where you get so caught up in reacting to everything. So slowing down a little bit so you can smell the roses, take the pause, see the God and good in other people is always a good idea. As you move your thinking from reactive thinking, which is really most of what the world does, they react to everybody and everything and every TV show, and you know, if you start to take charge of your thinking, you're doing what Ernest Holmes talked about. Ernest Holmes said you have executive power, which means you can really take charge of your thoughts. You don't have to be programmed by everybody. You don't have to, repeat everybody else's thoughts. Starting here, starting now, you can realize I am a center of God activity. I have power, and I can start seeing myself as empowered and able to do whatever I need to do. So those are some suggestions. And whatever you're preoccupied with in any given day, and we all are, Louise Hay had a good saying. She said, it's only a thought you're having right now about someone or something. And maybe it'd be a good idea to think about it or something, or take a pause, sleep on it. Whatever thought you seem to be fixated on, it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. If we're holding on to criticism and shame and blame and all of that stuff, it's a very damaging pattern for us, right? Even if you think you're right, it's still a damaging pattern if you're holding all that energy. So wherever we can release any of these negative thoughts, it would be very smart of us to do so. So what does this have to do with self-loving, self-esteem? Everything. Because when you change your thinking and you veer towards the positive side, everything starts to improve. But first of all, you got to know that you have an issue in order to turn it around. We have to find new ways to love ourselves. We used to work with the mirrors, and the affirmation always was, I love, accept, and approve of myself exactly as I am. And that might be when I'm suggesting that you say to yourself, I love, accept, and approve of myself exactly as I am. And keep doing that. I release the need to be critical. I release the need to criticize myself. When we start becoming mindful, a religious science practitioner they're charged with an awesome responsibility, because they're here to see that all is well, even when things don't look like all is well. They're here to know that everything is working out in divine order, and they're not here to be part of the problem. They're here really to be part of the solution. So you can ask yourself, do I have that willingness to see the good in this situation? Do I have that commitment? Am I willing to release my past and my past hurts? Am I willing to begin to love these people again, even though you may not want to be close to them necessarily? But are you still being a fault finder, or are you able to extend love to these folks? And again, I'm not saying reunite with them or anything like that, but we've all had some people in our lives where things have been tough. Do you have it within you to extend that love and that forgiveness toward them, at least spiritually? Because we're all connected. Honestly, we can prove now through scientific studies that our thought can be felt around the world. That's part of the study of quantum physics, and I think there's different experiments that I can't name off the top of my head. But so there's power in your thoughts, your thinking, and your prayers. And the suggestion here is to very liberally give out that positive thought and energy to people. One thing about energy, it's not depleted, and when you give it away, you extend it, it always comes back to you. You don't. It's Louise would say there's an inexhaustible supply. So keep giving and keep forgiving, keep giving and keep forgiving. The things that are happening to us in our life that we think are terrible or not happening to us, they're brought to us by consciousness. And so if we want to have things change, then we want to immediately start working on our consciousness. working on the outer stuff is, it's okay, but the real change comes from the inner to the outer. So we've all got through Thanksgiving, and I'm sure we have much to be grateful for. And tonight I'm going to hear your comments on gratitude and self-healing, and really how you're maintaining this positive consciousness, the consciousness that heals. What's it like being you? How are you doing to keep yourself buoyed up when things are happening? Sometimes things are pretty rough. What do you do to get yourself back on track? Or are you on track? And I want to give a special shout out to anybody who's new. I'm sorry we had the snafu with our tech stuff tonight, but whoever's here are the perfect right people, and we intend to keep on being on track. And there's a lot of people watch us on Facebook and Instagram and also YouTube. And so when you're hearing us this week, we appreciate your comments. Anybody who wants to support the center or its work too, please feel free to send in a check if you want to, or there's buttons on our websites and media. We appreciate whatever you can do. And the other thing too, if there's anybody who can benefit by what we do, tell them there's no charge, and we don't formally charge anybody. So everybody's welcome. There's some people who want to support our work, and so we welcome that too. Let me see if there's one other thing here. Louise Hay wrote that the universe totally supports you and me and every thought I think. And that would be for you too. Every thought you think, the universe totally supports you. Or put another way, our subconscious mind will accept whatever you're choosing to believe. So it's really important to choose worthy thoughts, right? Both of these ideas mean that what I believe about myself and about life becomes true, right? So what you choose to think about yourself and about life becomes true for you, and we always have unlimited choices about what we can think. You might have gone through a difficult day and you have an opinion about somebody and you're a little bit miffed, but if you want to, you could see the situation differently. You could see the person differently. Maybe they didn't communicate the way you expected or the way you wanted them to. We want to understand that everyone, sometimes people don't know how to express themselves well, but everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. We really don't want to have the consciousness where everybody's out to get us. We really want to embrace the consciousness that things are moving forward and that I am supplied and supported. She next gets into a section. She said, the universe itself never judges us or criticizes us. It only accepts us at our own value. Then it reflects our beliefs in our lives. If I want to believe that it's lonely and that nobody cares about me, she said, that's pretty much what I'm going to find in my world. However, if we're willing to release these types of beliefs and affirm love is everywhere, and I'm loving and I'm lovable, and hold on to that new thought affirmation and repeat it, I'm loving and lovable, then it will become true. Now loving people will come into my life. The people already in my life will start to become even more loving to me, and I will find myself easily expressing love to others. So she gets into other things which I'll save for another night. I'm going to close with her little, it's a paragraph for this particular chapter. She says, in the infinity of life where I am, everything's perfect, everything's wonderful. I believe in a power far greater than I am that flows through me every moment of every day. I open myself to the wisdom within, knowing that there is only intelligence in this universe. Out of this one intelligence comes all the answers, all the solutions, all the healings, all the new creations. I trust this power and intelligence, knowing that whatever I need to know is revealed to me, and that whatever I need comes to me in the right time, space, and sequence. All is well in my world. And so it is.